Another survey of NFL coaches and evaluators that say Jordan Love is not a top 10 quarterback. What's going on? Mike Sando from The Athletic, who did the survey, joins us to talk about all of it.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Mike Sando on the show today to talk about QB tiers. Jordan Love was 14th this time last year. He is 13th this year. And it was somewhat surprising. It was more surprising with the names that were ahead of him. Dak Prescott immediately ahead of him after a pretty disastrous season last year. Baker Mayfield ahead of him. CJ Stroud, Jalen Hurts. Those are really the names. Like I kind of expected Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Jaden Daniels, Matthew Stafford, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes. What's interesting is the commentary. And I'd encourage you to go read the piece, and Mike Sando is going to come on here and give us more context here. But so you guys know how I feel about Jordan Love. I don't need to rehash my arguments that say he's a top 10 quarterback. But what's interesting is last year, coming into the season, he actually got a tier 1 vote. Someone thought he was a tier 1 quarterback. And he got about the same number of tier 3 votes this year as he did last year off of really just one season. Let's go back to what was said about Jordan Love last year, though. Here is just some of the quotes. Of all the guys I think can ascend to a tier 1, this is the guy that comes to mind. He's got command of the offense. He can make every throw. He can make plays off script. He can make plays on script. He gets the ball out on time when everything is right, and he is more athletic than you think. He's got a playmaker's mentality, and he has started playing with a confidence that everybody can see. Sounds like a guy everyone thinks is going to be really good. Here's another one. He's a 2 going to a 1, an offensive play caller said. He had a perfect GD passer rating in the playoff game. He can make all the throws. He's composed. Very impressed. Here's the lone voter that put him in tier 1. Just watch him, man. It's hard to quantify into words. I'm going to tell you, watching with my eyes, I'm like, holy, this guy is starting to figure it out in a big way. Like, this is, and there were some other guys that said, hey, they were only 9-8. They snuck into the playoffs in a bad division. That guy put him in tier 3. The arrow was pointing up. And this is, I think, what happened. There was a lot of genuine excitement about Jordan Love in the league and in the media going into last season. And then Love didn't take that step forward. And what it ends up being in terms of perception is that he took a step back, that he regressed. When really what he did did not move forward in the way that we thought. That feels like a loss. Even though if you look at the efficiency numbers, he was better. He missed 3 games. If you extrapolate out, like touchdowns would have been the exact same. He actually improved his touchdown percentage, so how often he threw touchdowns as a percentage of his attempts in 2024. So, and he was hurt. Remember, he was hurt. And the team led the league in drops. It seems like he's being penalized for expectation. And I said this on social, I think part of this too is a confirmation of priors. A lot of people did not love Jordan Love in the draft. and the Packers take him. It's wildly shocking. A lot of fans, but there are still fans in Cheesehead Nation. I don't think they listen to the show, but there are a lot of fans that live to hate on Jordan Love still because he's not Aaron Rodgers and because he's not T. Higgins. And anytime he has a bad game, even the fans that are still fans and want to like Jordan Love, anytime he has a bad game, there's a group of fans that are going to go, man, could have had T. Higgins. Could have had T. Higgins. That piece of this just continues to pop up. And I think that contributes to the way that we view Jordan Love. And so then he doesn't have that step forward. It feels like a step back, even though it's not. And then all those people that didn't like Jordan Love in the draft, that had to begrudgingly admit after the 2023 season, oh, this guy is actually a franchise quarterback. They get to say, well, actually, I was never wrong. My priors this whole time said he was a risk taker, which we've talked about on the show is not a thing. Not really, not in the way that it gets talked about. And so this is where we land with the narrative and the perception that he is the 13th best quarterback in the NFL right now. He's going to have to show. Like, this is a big year for him to show that the second half of 2023 was not a fluke, that him being able to stay healthy was not a fluke. He's now dealing with a thumb injury on his non-throwing hand. Both of his hands are technically playing hands. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to be on the field, and he's got to be, if he's not healthy, figuring out a way to play better, to play more consistently, because the perception, the expectation going into 2024, I don't think they were wrong. I don't think we were wrong to be extremely excited about what Jordan Love could be. We could not have anticipated he would get hurt multiple times, 3 different injuries. And I don't think we could have foreseen that this team would lead the league in drops. I don't think we could have foreseen that. So, this is where we are right now. This is the perception of Jordan Love. And I will say it again. The perception of Jordan Love at the end of this season will be that he is one of the 5, 6, 7 best quarterbacks in the NFL. If he stays healthy, that is how this season will end. Now, what does the NFL think? Why do they think it? What do they care about? Mike Sando, who does this every year, the QB tiers, he was on last year to talk about Jordan Love. He's on this year to talk about Jordan Love. We will talk to him next on Locked On Packers. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Packers are playing Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league, Yahoo Fantasy is fantasy football. And I just know when the schedule comes out, I got to make sure I'm locked in. Matchups, players, draft. Okay, what rookies can I overreact to? You know that's what we all do in fantasy. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play Yahoo Fantasy, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's just one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Joining me now, it is an annual tradition, the quarterback tiers, which always provokes a lot of discussion. And the good news is we have the man himself, who is the architect of the QB tiers, Mike Sando from The Athletic. And Mike, I really enjoyed the conversation we did last year around Jordan Love, the first time we had a chance to actually have a tier based on his actual quarterback play, right?
Yeah.
Before we get to the Love part of this, I was interested looking at some of the rankings because I'm like, okay, Jalen Hurts, he wins. He's in there in tier 2. But you see some of these other guys like Justin Herbert, he doesn't win as much or at the same sort of level. So I'm trying to figure out, like, as you have these discussions, I feel like the NFL values winning more than sometimes us dorks in the media. And so I wonder, as you're having these discussions, are there certain things that stand out as like the NFL seems to care about these things, maybe more or maybe less, but just like, these are the things that they seem to care about?
Well, I think it's trying to figure out, division of credit is always a difficult thing to figure out in the NFL because there's 22 players on the field. There's defense, there's special teams, there's all these things that, I've tried to, in my career, figure out ways to contextualize, right? So when you have, Joe Burrow last year, just swimming uphill, putting up 35, 40 points, and they don't make the playoffs, that people can see through that and say, well, Joe Burrow didn't hold them back, right? I mean, it's kind of like when Drew Brees went 7-9 several years in a row. Right. They had historically bad defense, and he's throwing for 5,000 yards. He's doing everything they can, and without him, they might not win a game. So I think that's the type of context. Sometimes it's so extreme that it's easy to see. I think with Burrow, that's the case. In other cases where you have a team like the Eagles, where we know Jalen Hurts is pretty good. He made some huge plays in the Super Bowl. He's definitely not holding them back, but you can see also that they had a great roster with a great offensive line. And last year they took the ball out of his hands, right? And they were better when he wasn't handling it. So, there's that type of nuance in there. I think if you win long enough, that's going to, at a certain point, you're going to get some credit for that, right? Maybe you'll even get more than you deserve. But I think people just say, that if you look at Dak Prescott, he's never won in the playoffs, but he sort of hovers in tier 2, right? I mean, the year before last, he was second in MVP voting. He can put up a good season, even though he hasn't got over the top. So there's nuance in some of this stuff, but I think the league does the 50 panelists do a good job on the whole. There's some outliers here, but on the whole, when I look at this, it kind of makes sense to me.
I think so too, generally speaking. One of the anecdotes that stood out to me, Mike, was the one on CJ Stroud, actually, because one of your panelists said, I really I wanted him to see him beat the Packers. And I look at that game and I go, well, he had 92 passing yards. I think he had less than 50 net passing yards if you include the sacks. But with 2 minutes left, they had the lead. He had marched them down the field, and it was their defense that gave up the game. And I'm just sort of like, well, it doesn't seem fair. And I'm saying this from a Packers perspective, to hold that on CJ Stroud, who I thought was bad in the game, but that they lost because their great defense was the one that allowed Jordan Love to come down and score. It's just so hard.
Yeah, I agree. But he was, when you have 80 yards or whatever, 90 yards for the whole game, it was probably a balance. So it was a bad game. And I think also, let's just say I talked to, some of these comments or quotes are just the most interesting or provocative ones. It's not necessarily a reflection of that entire even conversation, let alone the group. I try to get a balance of them in there. I never want this to come off as just ragging on somebody. I like the interesting perspectives, and so like I thought Jordan Love was really fascinating because there were a lot of different opinions. Nobody thinks he's terrible, but and nobody thinks he should be in tier 1. But I don't think so. No, he didn't get a tier 1 vote. But there's just different perceptions of what it is that's going on there in Green Bay around the quarterback and with the quarterback, right? I thought there was maybe three different views in there, and I was like, I'd be interested to almost see. I'd love to poll the closest Packer followers, or just people who cover the team, and say which one of these are you buying? Is there truth in all of them? Is it none of them? Is it something else?
Yeah. Well, I look to them and I think they do represent the perception of Jordan Love, certainly. And so that from that standpoint, like none of them surprised me. No one said anything where I was like, oh, that's weird. No, they seem to make sense to me, even if I think some of the decision-making criticisms can be overstated at times. How much was there? It's not really in there in terms of what's actually in the story, but do you recall conversations around his injury, around his receivers? Because that's the context that I think sometimes can get lost in the conversations around Jordan Love.
Yeah, no, to me, the thing that caught my attention that I only heard from one person, I think that I put it in here, I think it was one, was the idea that, you know, Matt LaFleur could do things to tailor it more for Jordan Love as
Yeah.
opposed to having him run his offense. And, I thought that's an interesting perspective. It was definitely someone who's familiar with the Packers. It wasn't just someone talking, who had played them or knew a lot about them. What do you think of that?
Well, that
Have
was
we heard
that was
that
one
come up?
that I did think was particularly interesting, and I wanted to ask you about that. And because I guess I don't quite know the answer because it's so hard projecting these guys from college when Jordan Love at Utah State. I mean, that offense has nothing to do with what the Packers are running in the NFL. But I don't know if that's a bad thing necessarily. Like, I felt like there are times, for example, that I think Zach Taylor should encourage Joe Burrow to lean into some of the under center play action that he just doesn't seem to like to do. They were able to find ways to mitigate it. I think for a lot of the criticisms in Houston with Bobby Slowick, I think it helped CJ Stroud to play under center and get that under center play action. He played a lot of gun and spread at Ohio State too. So I struggle with that sometimes. Like, unless it's a Lamar Jackson where it's like, yes, we know we need to lean into his running ability. Jalen Hurts. It's so hard to know what is the optimal passing situations for Jordan Love. It really feels like it's hard to know that.
Yeah, especially when I think Matt LaFleur is known for doing a great job when Jordan was out of there of tailoring the offense around the backup, who was a very limited but
and around that other guy that used to play in Green Bay. I don't know if you remember his name.
Yeah, exactly. So that was just interesting to me. Maybe Jordan Love though can do enough things well that a coach doesn't feel like he has to tailor it, right? And he wants to do what he wants to do, and he thinks Jordan can do it, and it's just going to take some time to grow into it. Maybe some of those factors like the injury and receiver situation, and internally they're like, hey, if we can just get this, everything going at the same time, we're going to be fine.
In terms of, you mentioned the Matt LaFleur part of this, and I that was the one quote that had my antenna go up a little bit. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's the perspective. What is the perception of Matt LaFleur around the league?
I think it's good. I don't think that he. So when you talk about people who call the offensive plays, let's talk about him in that role as opposed to head coach because his hands on the steering wheel. I think that there's at any time in the league, there's probably only 5 or 6 callers that people in the league feel like are true differentiators, true elevators, right?
Yeah.
And I think he's on the fringes of that conversation. I think you're definitely going to say that Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, and Sean McVay. There's going to be a Ben Johnson got there, Andy Reid, and I think then you're going to say Matt LaFleur before you're going to say Matt LaFleur before you say 25 other guys, right? Isn't that kind of where it is?
Probably, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, something like that. So I think it's generally positive.
I mean, that's the part that is difficult. That you mentioned off the top, right? The situation is hard to disentangle with these quarterbacks, and so that's what makes this so tough. It felt to me like this was the biggest tier 2. I didn't go back and look. Is this one of the bigger tier 2s that you've had? Because it seemed like it felt like half the league was in tier 2 this year.
I don't think so. Off the top of my head, I don't think that it was. That didn't strike me. What did we have? 10 guys in there. I think it was about maybe 9 guys. I think that's normal.
It felt like for whatever reason, as I'm going down, it felt like 14 or 15. Like that was it just sort of felt like that. And that makes sense in a way that like there's 10 guys that all feel like they're either knocking on the door or clearly in that next tier.
Last year, there were 11 guys in there, and Jordan Love was the last guy in tier 2 last year. And then out of that group, Lamar Jackson and Matt Stafford climbed into tier 1. Last year, there were only 3 in tier 1, and Lamar was super close. And so you had basically Stafford and Lamar graduating into tier 1, Aaron Rodgers dropping out of 2 into 3, and then Cousins dropping out of 2 as well. So what do you make of that, Mike?
Because the Matthew Stafford thing is interesting. 37 years old, off of like by his standards, a fine season, and he moves up significantly in terms of the tiers. Certainly, were you given reasons to why people thought something so much higher of him?
No, and so here's what I think happened there. So last year he got 21 votes in tier 1, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's a lot.
This year he got 26, so he just barely makes the majority. So it's kind of like he moved across state lines, but he only moved 2 blocks. Like his house is only 2 blocks over.
Yeah.
But it's like, they
He's in a new school
redistricted or
district.
something. Yeah, they gerrymandered. Here that's in the news politically now. They gerrymandered, and like Stafford didn't do anything differently, and suddenly he's in the majority, right? Or I don't think anything really changed on that. I think it helped him that late in the in the playoffs that he had him right there in Philly, who won the Super Bowl, late in the game, and so there's always been a good respect. But yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to it other than the other thing is, I don't talk to the same 50 people. What's the overlap from year to year? Is there 25 people that I had last year that are in it? It's certainly not, there's not 40 of the same people. I wouldn't think. You change it up.
Do you ever have someone reach out to you and go, hey, I have some thoughts. Like, can I get in the voting here?
I've had people say, hey, you left me out of tiers. What? Come on. Hey, what happened? I've had that type of thing happen where sometimes it's just you don't connect with somebody. You might have tried and missed them or whatever the reason is. But I could go a lot higher number. I just think it gets cumbersome. 50's plenty.
Yeah. There's more to come with Mike Sando, QB tiers, Jordan Love talk, all the good stuff. That's next on Locked On Packers. August 28th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. How about the Jacksonville Jaguars to win the AFC South? How about the Denver Broncos to win the AFC West? How about the Dallas Cowboys at plus odds to make the playoffs? Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bet now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. The Jaden Daniels piece, there was a lot made of that. That he vaults right into tier 1.
Well, the edge of tier 1. He's top of tier 2.
The edge of tier 1, but like was getting tier 1 votes, right? How many tier 1 votes did he get?
17.
I mean, that's almost Matthew Stafford. He's in Matthew Stafford's neighborhood at least. And so the NFL tends to be more dubious of these rookie QBs. Do you think this rookie season was just so spectacular? What was it that had people sold this quickly?
I think you need to take that organization and you go that deep in the playoffs, with him being an integral part of what they were doing offensively. And then him just,
offense.
Exactly. I think that's the degree of difficulty is super high on that. So I think it's probably warranted. Now we'll say this, Justin Herbert, at one point set the record for the highest debut of a second-year quarterback, in this thing. And since then, he's kind of come back. He didn't sustain that and go higher. He hasn't fallen out of tier 2, but he's gotten fewer tier 1 votes every year for about the last 3 years. Then last year, C.J. Stroud broke Herbert's record. I think C.J. Stroud had like 12 votes in tier 1. He came back, only had 1 vote in tier 1 this year. So, I think there were some questions raised in the piece. Hey, I'm putting this guy, I'm anointing, or I want to see a little more, but I feel like he's going to be a 1. However, there is the idea that, the league gets a beat on you after 1 year. There's the idea that, Cliff Kingsbury, maybe it was Kyler Murray's fault, but when you were with Arizona, it didn't sustain as well. And then when we rely on your legs running, that's a thing too that doesn't always hold up injury wise, or just you can't always rely on it as much. So I think if he were to slide back, it would be for reasons that we could easily lay out right now, right? We would know that those would be the reasons.
Right. He gets hurt. Cliff Kingsbury. There's that fragility, I think, to the kind of offense, and a lot of reasons for sure. The Herbert's another name that I sort of zoomed right. I didn't quite control F it, but I was like close to being like, oh, I didn't have to scroll. I didn't have to scroll that far, but like it was shocking to me, Mike, when we put out our Locked On Top 100. The single player that I got the most pushback on was Justin Herbert. And so fans, they don't seem to think he's anything special. And the NFL, even after not taking the sort of steps that you would expect from someone with his talent, still thinks pretty highly of him.
They do. I think he's got 13 tier 1 votes. That's, like I said, it's gone down multiple times, multiple years in a row, but I don't think he's a plummeter because he's good. Wouldn't you say he's good?
Yeah, obviously, he's a really good player. I think he's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. When people watch him, I think they like what he can do. Now, is there something missing in some of these close games that he's not winning and should get him over the top? It feels like there might be. There hasn't been the team success. I think you could pin that somewhat for a while, that his defense, special teams were really bad, but last year it was better. Now they're taking the ball out of his hands too. That's another thing, is like this system is not designed to feature the quarterback in a way that makes you go, wow. And so is that going to limit, him from going up into tier 1? I would think with a good defense. Now, I don't know if they're going to be as good. We'll see. They played some bad offenses last year. Sometimes that can prop you up, but you generally, when you have a good defense and a good quarterback, you should be winning some games and making a playoff dent. Tough to do though in the AFC, right?
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, that conference is wild. I have to ask you about Jared Goff here, because he is right on the cusp. A 2.1 average.
Yeah.
The only guys ahead of him in tier 2, Jaden Daniels and Justin Herbert, like 8th. I think if you polled 100 NFL fans, they probably would not have put Jared Goff 8th. But I remember when Jeremy Fowler did his quarterback tiers, this was right where Goff landed, I think, for him too. What do you think the league sees that maybe the fans are not seeing? This is another one of those.
Well, I mean, you do have to remember he was the number 1 overall pick. So sometimes, like, hey, Brock Purdy was the last pick in the draft. It takes him a while to convince people that he's better than that. And maybe for a top pick like that. Now, he has had enough ups and downs, though, and been cast off, that to me, one of the biggest surprises in this thing was how high Goff was, because I thought people would say, well, Ben Johnson's leaving.
Yeah.
Watch, Goff's going to regress back to low 2, high 3. That's kind of what he is. He'll be like Cousins was when he was healthy. And, you respect him, you can win with him, but ultimately you're probably not going to go all the way. Isn't that kind of what you could have easily seen people doing?
Definitely.
Instead, he gets 5 tier 1 votes, like I think more than he's ever gotten combined previously. And he moves up. Not just in rank, but in his average vote. Like you said, 2.1, it's a 2.06 actually. So I'm not saying it's not deserved. I think people just think that he has made a jump. And I think one of the comments in there was that, like, when in the drop back passing game, he's more efficient than he used to be.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to argue, even with the Ben Johnson piece of it, it's hard to argue he hasn't gotten better. And I'm fascinated because of how the league has changed over the last year. Some of the things that we've seen, the Sam Darnold resurgence, for example, the Jared Goff resurgence. Has there been a difference in the way that the people you're speaking to talk about quarterback development, given we're seeing Baker Mayfield all of a sudden? I mean, Baker Mayfield was a street free agent like 18 months ago. And now, is a guy that it looks like people believe he's a tier 2 11 on this list. Has there been a shift, have you noticed, in terms of the tone of these sorts of conversations around development specifically?
I don't sense that too much. I think there's an acknowledgement that the situation really matters, especially for some of these guys that are drafted really high in the absence of super elite traits. Let's face it, right? There's more quarterbacks than ever. It's more quarterbacks being drafted in the first round, right? If you need one, you just take one. And so like a Bo Nix or some of these guys wouldn't even be first rounders maybe 30 years ago, right? Teams might not even take them. And so now I think more of these guys get pushed up based on the need. And now it becomes more important for those guys. It's important for all of them, but more important for those guys to be in the right situation. I think some of these guys at various points, Baker Mayfield got hurt, got into some bad situations, was probably a little immature, early in his career. But I always feel like if you have good talent, and you're willing to really work at it, that I think you can hang around and find a better situation and have a good year. I think that's been true for a long time in the NFL. And so, like, before I covered the NFL, I covered Ryan Leaf when he was at Washington State. Yeah. And look, he was so immature, but he had a wrist injury. I always felt like if he could have like grown up and just hung around long enough, like he might have had his day later in his career, like a Kerry Collins did, or some of these guys who struggled early and found some success. A Jim Plunkett, you can go way back. There's always been these guys that, Rich Gannon. He wasn't as highly drafted, but there's always been guys that if you can kind of just sort of do the right thing and hang around, you get in the right situation, Jimmy Garoppolo or whatever, you can have your day. And I feel like that's true now for some of these guys as well.
Yeah, people like there's sometimes this criticism where it becomes a disparagement. Oh, if you're a first round pick, you can stick around the league. It's like, yeah, because usually if you're a first round pick, it's because you have talent. Like you have tools. And so it's not like your first round draft pedigree is going to stick with you forever. It's because coaches look at you and go, yeah, we can do something with that. Like let's figure this out. And it seems like the more enterprising coaches are going to say, yeah, I can make this work. You have someone like John Gruden who falls in love with it and maybe can't do it the way that he would like to. Like, I think that you're right. This has been happening for a while now. And I think Matt Stafford is sort of proof that even late in your career, like, would you be surprised if Justin Herbert in his like age 34 season goes to a different situation and all of a sudden wins a Super Bowl? Like that wouldn't be surprising at all.
At all. No, I don't think it'd be surprising at all. And I do believe that the league and teams, there's more teams and coaching's more about making it easier for the quarterback. And something's lost in that. I mean, the nuance of some of the drop back game, guys just can't do it. And the offensive lines, probably aren't as good as they used to be in terms of staying together for years and being, blocking and tackling in practice in college and pros. It just makes you better. But at the same time, I think the coaches have done a much better job of, hey, here's what can make Bo Nix succeed, right? Here's what the key is for Brock Purdy, right? Or any number of these guys. Tua Tagovailoa was doing terrible early in his career. He's still not great, but they can have a top 5 offense with him if you set it up for his strengths, which he has some.
I want to end on a quick tangent. Please indulge me. Can you tell me, because I know that this was you've written about and we're covering the league as these guys were a part of it, but why are Mike Holmgren and Mike Shanahan not already in the Hall of Fame?
I think it's more about the process than those guys. So for the longest time, those guys were competing against players. They were in the same bucket as the players. And that was really hard when it came down to it. We saw a couple guys like a Bill Parcells made it through, but it was really hard. At the end of the day, the players had the advantage. And then they created these other categories to alleviate that pressure. They created a coach category. And for a while, like too many of the coaches were getting in, and some of the wrong ones to me. Like I was like, I
agree.
They're putting. I don't want to speak ill on anybody, but to me, like I would put those guys in before Tom Flores, right, or some of these other guys that were getting in. Dick Vermeil.
I would say Bill Cowher.
Coaches, but I was like, what is going on? And so I think it got a little bit too easy. And some of those guys who did TV, like Bill Cowher and Jimmy Johnson, had advantages. I think just in their notoriety. I mean, remember they were presenting these guys on the set, right? And Holmgren and Shanahan aren't in that world. I think that sort of helped. Then what the league did was they said, hey, too many people are getting into the Hall of Fame. So they created this. There's a separate category now for coaches and contributors and senior players, but the math is totally against them. So like, I did the presentation for Holmgren because I do it for people from the Seattle market, and he was Seattle in addition to Green Bay. And it went over really well. There was super strong support for Holmgren. The vast majority of people, I guarantee, thought he should go in the Hall of Fame. But the way the math is to where the votes get split and there's 3 seniors and 1 coach and 1 contributor, like you have to get 40 of 50 votes, I think each guy has to get in. Well, okay, if Sterling Sharp gets 49 out of 50, there's like a surplus of 9 votes that can't go to somebody else. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so there's no one there who's voting against Holmgren. or even Shanahan for that matter, who's close behind Holmgren in the coaches committee. But I think they made it almost too hard, because I got a lot of calls from people on the committee who were like, "What happened?" Like I would have. It just seemed like Holmgren was coasting right through.
Yeah.
And so there's not a sentiment against Holmgren. It was very confusing to people on the outside. You should have heard like the people that are around Mike Holmgren were like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like they're questioning the process. I kind of get it, but they're turning the dials constantly, to try to get the right mix, or the right way, raise the bar to the right level. And I think in this case, they maybe made it too hard.
All right, Mike, we could talk ball all day. I know you've got a lot on your calendar today. I really appreciate the time, and hopefully we can chat again soon.
Thank you. It was really fun.
All right, thanks to Mike for joining the show. Great to talk to him. His insight is pretty unmatched, I think, when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I always appreciate that, and I love the perspective on Mike Holmgren there. Just a little extra nugget. That's what you get when Sando comes on the show. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Back tomorrow. We'll be back to the Packers stuff with training camp. It is joint practices week. Matt LaFleur saying the starters are not going to play this week. They'll do joint practices, but then joint practices next week, and they will play in the preseason finale as a tune-up toward the regular season. Back tomorrow. Social medias. Go follow us there. Go follow me there. Go follow the podcast there. And go wherever you find podcasts. Go. Subscribe to us. Subscribe on YouTube so you can stay locked on Packers.